there are ways to keep things fresh down the road. And we may get to that point where that's necessary. I like these innovations that have been made, and I'm curious to see where it goes down the road.
The game hasn't returned to Salt Lake City since 1993. So just a general question, just what's the vibe around the city? What's the excitement like? Is there just a lot of buzz going on? I mean, there's been a lot of injuries within the league, but still NBA All-Star Weekend is one of the biggest events just in sports in general.
There's a bit of ambivalence. On the one hand, there are a ton of people who are just absolutely thrilled that All-Star Weekend is coming here because, as you mentioned, it hasn't been in Salt Lake City since 1993. So this is the 30th anniversary of that. So on the one hand, yeah, people are absolutely excited that the league is coming back, that the stars are going to be here. Conversely, I think a lot of people were maybe unprepared for how the league and its kind of showcase event has changed in those 3 decades. I think there were a lot of locals hopeful that like they could, actually maybe go to the All-Star game or go to All-Star Saturday night events, and then kind of belatedly discover the sticker shock associated with those events. And so there's a little bit of disappointment that the realization has set in that those are kind of like, to be crass and blunt, corporate events almost, right? Like those are big money making events for the league. So I think people are kind of now pivoting to, all right, what are some of the other things going on that maybe aren't the marquee events, but which are things happening maybe Saturday morning or Friday morning, things that they can attend without necessarily having to like take out a mortgage on their homes.
Do you see that damaging the league? Just because I think the NBA has a reputation among sports as more of a fan-friendly league compared to its peers. Do you think it might hurt just the NBA's reputation among its fans that, in years in the future, it becomes just this big corporate event and this hardcore fans are iced out just due to the price?
That's an interesting question. I think there are a few things going on with the league that have the potential to kind of turn fans off. I mean, there's the ongoing issue of load management that is really, I think, maybe the bigger problem in terms of the All-Star game. It certainly is disappointing. Like, just to give an example, I have a young adult son who, when news broke way back in 2019 of the All-Star game returning to Salt Lake City, he and a friend of his said, hey, let's start saving up money, maybe like $1,000 each. Like we can, like knowing that it was going to be an expensive thing, but hoping that like that would be enough to kind of get them in the door and have a once in a lifetime type experience. And then tickets go on sale and they find out that like $1,000 doesn't get them anywhere close to what they need. Right. That's problematic. And it is troublesome that, so many of the hardcore, like actual legitimate fans of basketball are not able to, have any opportunity to see a game such as this. Jazz owner Ryan Smith was kind of doing a pre-All-Star news conference the other day and then kind of addressed this problem. He said one of the things that people don't realize in advance is just how few actual tickets there are for basketball fans, because the league's got so many tickets it needs to give to this sponsor and to that corporate company that they do business with. And, before you know it, there's nothing left for, the average Joe on the street. So it is unfortunate. I wish there was a way around it. I don't know that there is necessarily, just because the All-Star game has become so monolithic at this point. Honestly, the league treats it as a money-making opportunity because there is that demand, from those corporations that it does business with. And so unless we see like widespread fan revolt in terms of buying tickets to regular season games as a result, which I don't think is going to happen, the All-Star situation probably is what it is going forward.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I mean, my mind goes to, you always hear about the like demographic that sports in general, but the NBA included in that is, they're trying to target getting 18 to 30-year-olds to watch. But it seems like with prices like that for things like this, it's kind of like, you guys watch at home. We'll let other people who can afford it pay. I mean, unless you're doing very well for that age range, it doesn't seem like there's a tie-in with getting that demographic to the live games. And granted, this is a special event with the All-Star event.
Yeah, and it's interesting because having been to previous All-Star games, I can tell people until I'm blue in the face, like, hey, being in the arena is not necessarily that great. Like, it might actually, from a fan point of view, it might actually be a superior experience just watching it on TV like you normally do. No one wants to hear that when the All-Star game is in their city for the first time in 30 years, right? Like everyone is holding on to that ideal, that dream of like, wouldn't it be cool to be in the building as it's going on? And I get that. And it's just, as you said, it's just not a feasible thing because the NBA has grown into kind of such a monetary juggernaut over the years and decades. And so this being the special one-off event that it is on an annual basis, like you're going to run into this problem so long as there are corporations willing to shell out that kind of money for tickets, so long as there are individuals willing to shell out that kind, $1,500 for a nosebleed seat.
Jeez.
And right. And that's happening. It's not like any recent all-star event has been lacking for fans, except for the one that they had in Atlanta during COVID times, where that was a deliberate decision. In other years, like of course the event always sells out because you've got people from all over the league who have the money that they can shell out to buy a ticket regardless of the price. So it's hurtful to the little guys, and I'm sympathetic to that, but I also don't see a way around it. And so, I would say, hey, just save up your money for when Giannis comes to town, or when Luka comes to town, or when Jason Tatum comes to town, and pray to God that their coach is not holding them out on that night.
So with the All-Star game, at least with the NBA, I can't speak to other sports, but I think speaking for all hardcore fans, usually the Monday after the game's played, there's usually a ton of complaints. No one's really happy. It's kind of like a dour mood for the celebration of basketball. So seeing other sports take unique approaches, you see the NFL do the Pro Bowl games, you see the NHL do some stuff on the beach, then they actually play the traditional All-Star game. They do some unorthodox things. The NBA is no stranger to doing that. Do you see a point to where in the future this game is completely different?
I do think that it's going to continue to evolve over the years. I mean, we've seen changes happen, in the last 5 years that have needed to take place in order to kind of freshen it up, because we got to a place where guys playing zero defense and Giannis going 18 for 18 with 18 dunks simply became pointless, right? Like why even bother at that point? So I think some of the changes that have happened recently have gone a ways towards making things more compelling. The captains having their drafts, I think, has freshened things up a bit. I think the further evolution of that this year, where like the draft will take place on the court like a half hour before the game starts, is another entertaining wrinkle. Having gone to the All-Star game in Chicago a few years ago, where the Elam ending made its debut, that really, being in the arena, I can attest to the fact that it went from being kind of a very dull atmosphere to all of a sudden you could feel the intensity ratchet up in that fourth quarter, when all of a sudden you're maybe 24 points away from victory or defeat. So I think, innovations such as that have helped. Who knows, maybe in another 5 years, we'll see things take a dramatic shift again. Honestly, you take a look at what they're doing with the Rising Stars tournament this year, and where you've got like 4 teams playing a mini tournament. That could be a way to go. Maybe at some point down the road, you're seeing like teams drafted from each division or something like that, or you're seeing 4 captains picking their teams and then playing tournament style. There are ways to keep things fresh down the road, and we may get to that point where that's necessary, just because I think once we reached the point of games in the traditional format becoming 190 to 182, you could say, all right, that format has outlived its usefulness. Let's do something different. And I like these innovations that have been made, and I'm curious to see where it goes down the road.